This conference will now be recorded.
Let us try to understand certain important points related to integration today. So let's write integration with EMM and ST. So let me put FI integration with EMM and ST. So this is one of the important topics to be discussed in your all FICO interviews. When you talk about FI integration with MM and FI integration with ST, what exactly we need to understand from integration point of view, let us try to discuss. Point number one, we are talking about integration from FI to MM. Point number two, we are talking about integration from FI to SD. So far, we have talked about accounts payable module and we have also talked about accounts receivable module. In short, we have a fair understanding about what is accounts payable, what is accounts receivable. In general, when you talk about accounts receivable, we are going to talk about customer or vendor. In accounts receivable, are we going to talk about customer or vendor?
Customer accounts receivable.
Right? In your accounts receivable, we are going to talk about customer. Similarly, in the accounts payable, we are going to talk about vendor or supplier. When it comes to FI MM integration, MM is a separate module like FI. The way you have financial accounting FI, similarly there is a different module called materials management or MM module. This is also called as logistics module. On the other side, the way you have FI module financial accounting, we have another module called SD or sales and distribution. This is another module called sales and distribution. This is also part of your logistics module. When you talk about logistics, it is all about material movements. How you are getting the product or service and how you are delivering or rendering or providing the service or goods to your customer. When it comes to purchasing cycle, when it comes to sales cycle, what exactly happens is what you are going to understand from the integration point of view in SAP. Because if you take any organization, finance is a separate department, materials management, in short, purchasing is a separate department, sales and distribution, in short, sales is a separate department. So there will be a coordination between purchasing team, sales team and finance team. This coordination between these three teams is called as integration in SAP. Okay, so why we call it as integration? When you are trying to do anything from the purchasing side, you are going to procure the material or you are going to render the services or you are going to receive the services. If you are procuring the material or if you are receiving any material, you have to pay to the supplier. You have to pay it to the supplier. When you are purchasing anything, there are two ways of purchases. Option number one, you can directly go and purchase it. Option number two, you will place the order what you need. Based on your order, the supplier or vendor will deliver the product or services that you have requested for. So wherever you are placing the order and receiving the product or service, there you are calling it as a purchase order. Wherever you are directly walking into a store purchasing directly, this is your direct finance purchases. This is your direct finance purchases wherein there is no order. But in most of the cases, if you take any organization, any purchase that they talk about, they will be placing an order. They will place an order to the supplier. Based on the order, supplier is going to supply the product or provide the service. After providing the service or after providing the product, they will be giving you the invoice, in short, the billing. Based on the goods or services that have been delivered to you, your biller, your supplier or your vendor is going to give you an invoice or the bill. This invoice you are going to record in finance. This invoice you are going to record in finance. In short, you need to start understanding the FIMM integration from purchase order point of view only. Anything that you are purchasing based on the purchase order is part of FIMM integration. Similarly, you may be selling something to the customer. When we say we are selling something to the customer, there are two ways of sales here also. Point number one, customer can walk into the store, he can buy whatever he wants and then he will go. Point number one. Point number two, customer will place an order with you that this is the product or this is the service that I need. Based on the customer order, you are going to provide the product or you are going to provide the service to the customer. Once the product or service is delivered or given to the customer, you are going to bill the customer or you are going to provide invoice to the customer. So wherever the customer is purchasing from you or you are selling to the customer based on the order, in short, based on the sales order. These sales order based transactions are called as order based or sales order based sales. Anything that you are selling based on the sales order is called as FISD integration. If you're talking about FIMM integration, it is all about purchases. If you're talking about FISD integration, it is all about the sales. How purchasing will happen, how sales will happen in an organization, first we need to understand before we get a clarity, before we understand the logics behind SAP FICO integration with MM or SD module. For FIMM integration, you are going to have vendor. For FIMM integration, you are going to have vendor. Similarly, for FISD integration, you are going to have a customer. FIMM integration is related to vendor related transactions. FISD integration is related to customer transactions. Wherever you have vendor, you are going to call it as accounts payable. Wherever you have vendor, we call it as accounts payable. Similarly, wherever you have customer, you call it as accounts receivable. Accounts receivable. As far as we know, in accounts payable, we are talking about purchases. As far as we know so far, when you talk about accounts payable, it is related to purchases. Similarly, when you talk about accounts receivable, this is related to sales. Are these points clear till now? Are these points clear? FISD is related to customer, accounts receivable, sales. Similarly, FIMM is related to vendor, accounts payable, purchases. Once we understand these basic points, these are the initial basics that we need to understand before we step into SAP, before we understand what exactly is happening in MM integration, what exactly is happening with SD integration, why we are doing these integrations. When you talk about purchases, in general, you are going to have purchases followed by payment. Correct? You will purchase something, you will pay for what you have purchased. This is what in general that is going to happen. Similarly, on the sales side, you are going to sell. Once sales are completed, you are going to collect the payment. First, you will purchase something and then you will make the payment. Secondly, you will sell something, you will receive the payment. You will purchase something, you will make the payment. You will sell something, you will receive the payment. On the other side, this is called as P2P cycle. This is called as P2P cycle. This is called as OTC cycle. So these terms you must have heard previously. Somebody is talking about I am working in P2P process or I am working in O2C process or P2P cycle, O2C cycle. When somebody is talking about P2P cycle, we mean procurement to payment. When somebody is talking about P2P cycle, we mean procurement to payment. Similarly, when somebody is talking about O2C cycle, we are talking about order to cash. When you talk about procurement to payment, procurement is nothing but purchasing. Procurement is nothing but purchasing. Let's say if you are purchasing a product, you can purchase a product or you can also purchase a service. So whatever you are procuring, you can procure a goods, you can also procure the services. So whenever you're talking about procurement is nothing but purchases. When you're purchasing, you can purchase product or service. Clearer? In short, goods or service. Either you call it as product and service, or you can also call it as goods and services. Similarly, on the order to cash, here also it is the same thing. If you are purchasing goods or services or product or services, you are going to sell the same thing. You will be selling product or services, or you will be selling goods or services. Either you will be selling goods or services or product or services. Any terminology remains the same meaning, but people will use it with different names. The context and the meaning is the same. Any questions so far?
No.
Clear, right? Okay. Next one. When you're talking about purchase and when you're talking about sales, we were talking about P2P cycle, O2C cycle. P2P, you talked about procurement to payment, wherein you are purchasing a product or service. O2C, you talked about order to cash, wherein you are selling product or service. Now, if I come down, when you're talking about P2P cycle, first we need to understand what is P2P cycle. Procurement to payment. Why we call it as a cycle? Because it is a chain based purchasing system. When I say chain based purchasing system, everything is interconnected, everything is interlinked. One process is connected to another process, and the another process is connected to the next process. It is not a dependent it is not an independent activity. This is a dependent activity. Every activity that you need to do, you need to check if the previous activity is completed or not. You need to verify if the previous activity is completed or not before you perform the next activity or next step. First, we will try to understand from order. First, we will try to understand from order. When I talk about order, here I'll put purchase. It is in column C. I'm going to put this sales here. So when you're purchasing, you're going to place an order. When you're going to sell, you're going to place an order. In short, your purchases are based on the order. Your sales are also based on the order. If you're talking about order related to purchase, you call it as purchase order. If you're calling an order which is related to purchase, you call it as PO. In short, you call it as PO. If you're talking about an order which is related to sales, you call it as SO. You call it as SO. When you're in the real environment, we very rarely use purchase order, sales order terminology. We will be frequently using PO, SO. When you're talking about PO, you must represent or you must understand PO means purchase order, SO means sales order. This is something that you need to understand right from the beginning. So you need to start getting used to the shortcuts, different terminologies that we use when you're in a real environment. When your user is talking to you, user is not going to explain or elaborate, or your client will not explain or elaborate, or your MM consultant will not explain, he will not elaborate purchase order every time. So he will tell PO. When somebody is telling PO, you have to understand purchase order. When somebody is telling sales order, they will not tell sales order, they will tell SO. Tell me the SO number, tell me the PO number, what is the problem with the PO, what is the problem with SO, is SO created, is PO created, is PO approved, is SO approved. These kind of terminologies people will be using frequently. So what we need to do, we need to get used to these terminologies. We need to get used to these terminologies so that you are able to connect to the point. Next, in short, I call it as purchase order here. And here I am going to call it as sales order. So let me color purchase order here. Let me color sales order here. So your purchases are based on purchase order, sales are based on sales order. When you're creating a purchase order, based on the purchase order, there is one more activity called or let me put PO. Next to PO, you are going to have GRN. Next to GRN, you are going to have invoice verification. Next to invoice verification, you will have payment. Next to payment, you are going to have BRS. In general, when somebody is talking about purchasing cycle or P2P cycle, you will be talking about purchase order, GRN, invoice, payment, BRS. Similarly, when somebody is talking about sales process or OTC cycle, you need to talk about SO, sales order, followed by delivery, and PGI, next billing, payment, and BRS. When somebody is talking about purchase order process or P2P cycle or FIMM integration, you need to talk about purchase order, GRN, invoice, payment, BRS. Similarly, when somebody is talking about sales process or OTC cycle, sales order process, you need to talk about sales order, delivery or PGI, billing, payment, BRS. So are these points clear? You must remember these points, no exception for this. Strictly you have to talk about this, strictly you have to explain the process points in a systematic way. In a systematic way you have to explain. If you are unable to explain these processes properly, the chances of getting rejected are more. If you are not explaining these processes properly, chances of getting rejected are more, not getting selected. Rejection chances are more if you are unable to talk these processes properly. When you're talking about these processes, make sure you're talking based on your understanding, not based on what you read on the Google. Alright. Now, when you talk about PO, so let me put PO here. When I talk about PO, I mean purchase order. PO, I mean purchase order. GRN, I mean goods receipt note. This is invoice receipt. Payment is nothing but payment made to vendor. BRS is nothing but bank reconciliation. Similarly, on the SO side, you have SO. SO means sales order. Next one, delivery or PGI. Delivery is nothing but, this is delivery. PGI is nothing but post goods issue. Next one, bill is nothing but billing. Next, payment, here you are talking about payment received from customer. Next, BRS is same, bank reconciliation. Are these terms clear? Clear this terminology?
Yes.
So when you talk about PO, you are talking about, one sec. When you talk about PO, we are talking about purchase order. Next one, GRN, we are talking about goods receipt note. Invoice is nothing but invoice receipt. Payment is nothing but payment made to vendor. BRS is nothing but bank reconciliation. On the sales side, SO is nothing but sales order. Deliveries is nothing but delivery, and PGI is post goods issue. Bill is nothing but billing. Payment, here we are talking about payment received from customer. BRS is nothing but bank reconciliation. So these basic points first we need to understand. We need to have very good clarity on this so that there is no point of getting confused. There is no point of feeling that this is tough, this is difficult going forward on the integration related areas. Now, we need to understand financial impact. Let me write something called financial impact. When I talk about financial impact, how these points are affecting your finance. I am going to use only PO here. Next I'll write GRN, invoice, payment, BRS. Same points let me put here: sales order, delivery slash PGI, billing, payment, BRS. When we talk about PO or when we talk about purchase order, here we are representing no financial impact. PO, there is no financial impact. This is a legal document between buyer and seller. Okay, there is no legal document. This is a legal document between buyer and seller. This is your PO, in short, purchase order. Second one, GRN. When you do a GRN, do we have any financial impact or there is no financial impact?
Yes, sir. Financial impact.
Here we have financial impact. Okay, here you'll have financial impact. Which means accounting entries will be posted or accounting entries will be created. GRN, you have financial impact, which means accounting entries will be created at the time of invoice.
Yes, sir. Financial impact.
At the time of invoice also, you are going to have the same thing. Next one, payment.
Yes, sir.
Here I will put same thing. You have financial impact. In short, accounting entries will be created. What about BRS?
This is for internet transfer.
Here also you have financial entries created. There is an accounting impact. So I'll put this in a separate box. this in a separate box. Blindly remember these points as it is at the beginning. Later on, I'll explain why we are writing all this. Because when we talk about at high level, I need to make sure you are not getting confused. You are able to understand what is what. Any confusion with this? Purchase order, no financial impact. This is a legal document between buyer and seller. GRN, you have a financial impact. Whenever you're talking about financial impact, we are clearly mentioning that debit and credit accounting entry is posted. Similarly, when you're talking about invoice, there is a financial impact, which means accounting entries will be created. For payment also, there is a financial impact, accounting entries will be created. For BRS also, there is a financial impact, accounting entries will be created. Similarly, let us try to map from the SD side. I'll put the same definition is applicable for your sales order. Let me put sales order, and here also it will be the same. I'll copy this, I'll put this here, I'll replace first and then I'll bring it here. GRN, I'm going to replace it with delivery slash PGI. This will be replaced with invoice, which means billing. This is payment, this is BRS. Now let me put them here. Just look at this table alone. Just try to refer from your side. Let me know if you find any confusion. Steps that we have written here and whether you are clear with these points or not. Whatever I have written as it is, if you are able to understand or not. Any questions or you are able to understand these points?
Yes, sir, got it.
Okay. So this is first point that I want everybody to understand. What is there inside your FIMM integration? What is there inside your FIST integration? This is point number one that you need to remember. So that if somebody is asking you, first you need to explain when it comes to purchase order or when it comes to P2P cycle or when it comes to FIMM integration, you need to talk about purchase order, good GRN, invoice, payment, BRS. Similarly, when somebody is asking you about FIST integration or OTC cycle, straight away talk about sales order, delivery, PGI, billing, payment, BRS. And you must understand where there is financial impact and where there is no financial impact. Where there is financial impact, where there is no financial impact. So first one, if I have to add a point here, okay, so what I'll do here, let me write another point. This is related to module and integrated to FI module. Clear? This is related to module and integrated to FI module. Similarly, same point is applicable for here also. This is related to module and integrated to FI module. Same point here as well, but here this is related to MM
SD.
and SD module. This is related to MM and SD module and integrated to FI module. And the billing, this is related to SD module alone. And this is a complete FI module, no integration with MM. This is a complete, or this is related to complete FI module, no integration with MM. Same point for BRS. Here as well, same point, no integration with SD here. Same point here as well, no integration with SD. If you refer it now, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
You need to make sure you are clear with these points, you are not getting confused.
Sir, Ajay sir, it is very helpful if you have mentioned the journal entries also in the
That I'll
same
write in
column.
the next stage.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so before we write journal entries, I want you to understand in general first. So that next I'll write journal entries and from where the entries are coming, what exactly the scenarios, examples I'll give in the upcoming sessions. But those points we will be able to understand, relate, map only if we are clear with these basic fundamentals.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Yep.
So I want everybody to remember these points as it is. Okay, so that it will be easy, helpful for you to understand complete MM and ST integration without any problems. Now, people might be asking you about P2P cycle or FIMM integration. In your interview, they might ask you, tell me about P2P cycle, or they might ask you about FIMM integration. Similarly, relating to this, they might ask you to explain about OTC cycle or they might ask you to explain about FI/SD integration. When they talk about SD integration, you need to talk about these points. When they talk about MM integration, you need to talk about these points. So these are the basic points, basic fundamentals that you need to go through, that you need to remember at the beginning. Clear? So that you will find integration very easy and you will be able to understand without any problems. Because whatever is needed, to what extent you need to involve in the FIMM integration process, only to that extent you need to remember or that you need to learn at the beginning. Because tomorrow you will be clearly questioned, what was your role in the FIMM integration, or what was your role in the FISD integration? What did you do in your integration? What did you test in your integration? So you have to be very specific. You should not talk about the total process about integration. You have to limit yourself. You have to limit yourself to the FI module alone. As a FICO consultant, whatever you did or whatever you do in a project, only those points we need to talk clearly. Nothing beyond that, nothing below that. Clear? If you're talking beyond that and if you're talking below that, that represents that something is wrong with this candidate. He is exactly not clear what happens with integration, where the FI module consultant or FICO module consultant will be involved. So you have to be very, very clear. For that to happen, you need to remember these points in the similar sequence. Then I will connect your total integration with these points. Based on this, I'll make it even more simple, even more easier to make you to connect to the practical examples, live scenarios. Clear?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let me stop this recording.